Today on A Load of BS on Sport, we welcome one of the greatest athletes this country has ever produced, two-time Olympic gold medalist and serial sufferer in Lycra. It is triathlete Alistair Brownlee.
I completely drove myself out and I was trying to remove willpower out of the equation. And I did that by firstly making my life and training really habitual. So I wake up Monday morning, the alarm goes off. It's who I am, it's what I do, it's part of my life.
Dan, much of what makes an endurance athlete successful is their ability to tolerate, even get a kick out of pain. Of course, your competition as a rugby player is sort of restricted to 80 plus minutes or so on the field. But to get to that point, I guess there are hours and days of training that goes into it. And I just thought, as a preamble to chatting with Alistair, as an entry point into this pod, what did pain mean for you? And maybe you could highlight some moments in your career when you kind of went close to that line or over the line of what your body could cope with.
Yeah, I mean, firstly, Dan, I reckon Alistair's training may be slightly more difficult than what we're used to on a Monday to Friday. But I suppose when you look at it like that, we spent some summers in Qatar in 45-degree heat, in Turkey and Switzerland and those places for World Cup training camps, where a lot of it wasn't really what you could do with a rugby ball. It was kind of how much and how far you could push your body physically and how mentally strong you were. And I think that's something that I'm listening to Alistair speak. It's like a lot of it is like, how much can you accept being in pain as well? And for us, it was kind of like, whether it was the running side of it, whether it was the cardio side, the weight side, whatever. I kind of thought, like, for me, I kind of enjoyed those moments because, you know, you're not in those moments for that long when you actually break it down. And like, I think that's what separates really top end people like Alistair compared to maybe people in the middle of the pack. But for me, I kind of felt like how much, because mentally, those are the strong people. Like physically, like I'm exhausted from like rep 2 or rep 3. You know what I mean? It's not like I'm fit and I'm really strong and not feeling tired until the end. But it's just like, to tell you a really, really good example of that was Alan Wynne-Jones, who everyone used to think of him as like this amazing fitness guy and would be so fit and keep going. But he was actually, and this is meant as a compliment to him, not actually that fit. But what he had the amazing capacity to do mentally was just keep on going and keep pushing himself to the limit, even when he was absolutely knackered. So I suppose for pain, for me, from a training point of view, that's what it means, is not so much how much you can do, but when you are absolutely knackered and absolutely out on your feet, can you push yourself a bit more? Can you keep going an extra rep, an extra 2 reps, whatever it is? And I suppose that's what I replicated. It's funny, I remember doing a rowing session. It was a 17-minute rowing session we had to do out in Switzerland one year. And I was out on my feet after 3 minutes, thinking I had 14 minutes left to dig in. And I'm just thinking, honestly, I've managed to just plod along. So for me, that's the definition of training pain, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, I was kind of wondering, how are you able, you sort of touch on this, like psychologically, just to deal with the relentlessness of training, especially when you're lying in bed of a morning, probably even more so now at this stage of your career, sore body, tired mind. I wonder whether did you have rituals and techniques to drag yourself out and go and keep going again? I suppose just thinking like, how can you put yourself in the best possible position to be when it comes to a match during a World Cup or a match on a Saturday, whatever it is. I suppose that was the only drive for me. Like, I never really enjoyed training. You know what I mean? If someone gave, if someone gave me the option of, could you go for breakfast or brunch and a flat white or whatever, instead of running up a mountain or whatever it is, then you'd probably take that. But I kind of knew that was what was required. And I think when you sign up to be a rugby player, a sportsman, a triathlete, whatever it is, that's kind of what is required of you. And that was my mindset. Not that, I'd never be the one who like said, oh, I love this training or I love putting myself through this, because I didn't. But I knew that was what was required. And I knew that mentally, that was probably one of my biggest strengths, probably, that I was mentally relatively strong in that sort of capacity. because I probably needed it to make up for my lack of physical ability, sort of thing.
Fair enough. Well, you're very modest, but yeah, great. Well, I don't disagree. I certainly take a latte and brunch rather than climbing up a mountain, but I don't think either of us are unique in that desire. But on that note, why don't we hear from the king of endurance himself and bring in Alistair. Alistair Brownlee, welcome to you. Lovely to see you.
Yeah, well, great to see you both, and thank you very much for having me on.
It is a great pleasure from both of us. Now, Alistair, you said of your retirement last year, I quote, "This marks my transition from professional triathlon, a moment approached with both dread and excitement in equal measure." So that was less than 6 months ago. Now that the major races are definitively over, what are you running towards today?
Mm-hmm. Well, still working that out. If I'm honest, there's definitely a lot less dread, and there's still plenty of excitement. But yeah, I was a professional athlete for 18 years and training seriously before that. That's a lot of swimming, cycling, and running, and it really has kind of defined and been the major part of my life. So yeah, I'd say I spent it's not quite been 6 months yet, so I'm still letting myself off the hook. I'd say I spent most of that time on holiday, kind of taking things a bit more slowly, still enjoying staying really active. And, like this morning, I've been out for a run just because it's what I want to do. Got a number of exciting kind of work kind of things that I'm now working out exactly what to do and what to balance. And some really interesting stuff.
Bit of casual Ironman, just to keep the fitness at a certain level. I see.
Well, maybe I want to do a bunch of challenges. I mean, like I said, sport, being activity, staying fit, and adventure, exploration, being outside. That's such a massive part of my life. And ultimately, I still love it. I'm definitely not one of these sports people who crossed the last finish line and hung up my running shoes and got straight off my bike. I'm not that at all. I love being active. It's still a big part of my life and my social life and everything. So yeah, I'm staying pretty fit, hopefully.
Nice. I want to bring Dan in actually, because of course Dan is edging closer to the finish line himself from at least career phase one. And it's often this interesting kind of comparison when we chat with athletes like yourself who may be just one step ahead in terms of the career. I mean, Dan, listening to Alistair, how are you feeling about your imminent retirement? Do you think you're going to be still out running every morning and doing the lengths?
It's funny listening to Alistair sort of just saying he's just been for a bit of a leisurely run or a bit of a stroll on the bike, etc. Whereas like my day job is getting whacked about for 80 minutes on a Saturday. So I'm not sure when I actually finish, I'll volunteer to go and get myself whacked about on a Saturday afternoon. But I suppose I'm quite excited. I don't know how you felt when you were edging or when you sort of made that decision, Alistair, in terms of how you felt towards it. Was it sort of regret? Because for me, or not so much regret, but was it sort of, dreading it a little bit? You hadn't had things in place, etc. Because for me, I'm quite excited by the next stage. And I think I saw somewhere you said you didn't want to be defined by just being Alistair Brownlee, the triathlete type of thing. You wanted to have lots of different bits and pieces going on outside. And I felt like that's probably where I'm at currently. So is that something that you feel similar with?
Yeah, I think that's very fair to say. I think, I think firstly, I kind of probably knew that I was going to retire at that point at the end of last year for a couple of years beforehand. I wasn't entirely sure. And where I started off at like 25% sure, I just got more and more sure over time that it was right. And I was probably 90% sure that last race was going to be the last race. And it went pretty well. And across the finish line, I thought, no, I'm not going to make a definitive decision until tomorrow. I made the decision and definitely have not regretted it at all, to be honest. So, I think the only way I can describe it is it just instinctively has to feel right. It is a massive decision, but kind of really just go on instinct on it. But a big part of that was, being excited about the other opportunity to have outside of sport. And I think that's important. There's so many stories of ex-athletes kind of waking up the day after their career and not knowing what to do and struggling. And obviously you've lived a really strict, disciplined, very focused, routine-based life. And when that goes, I think anyone would struggle in that position. So having things are exciting and are going to give you kind of structure and meaning, I think are really important. And I really fundamentally believed it was actually important during my career as well. So I kind of had an outlet. I had something else that kind of I was about and I could attach my personality to, gave me a bit more structure, and also made me feel comfortable about a life after sport.
So someone said to me, Alistair, once, I forget who it was, but it was a while ago, they sort of said, when you know, you'll know. And I'm getting towards the stage where I know, type of thing, do you know what I mean? It's kind of like I'm at that stage where things are getting a little bit harder physically. You're not, you don't feel 21, 22 anymore. So I suppose that's a good stage to know when you're coming towards the end. You mentioned about having other bits and pieces going on around and different areas for finishing up, etc. You also said, I've read some of that. You said you weren't actually particularly good at that at the start. Can you sort of maybe expand on that a little bit and explain to us what you meant by that?
Yeah, so right at the start of my career, I was studying at university, studying medicine, and I then decided to make the decision to drop out of studying medicine and focus on triathlon and to try and go to the Olympic Games. I always then studied kind of alongside my sporting career to start with. I had my coach, Malcolm, was like really believed and extolled in me the value of studying, and he was completely right. So I did an undergraduate degree in sports science then, and then a master's in finance. So I always had other things, and then there was probably a gap where actually I didn't necessarily do a lot of other stuff alongside my career, and you definitely start to lose like skills when you do that. Lose ability probably to communicate with other people in that kind of environment. Lose maybe my ability to write and be clear and communicate in that way, and various other things. So yeah, I always kind of recommend to athletes, if they have got the chance, just do bits alongside it, just to keep that kind of perspective and context and skills in the outside world. And then, yeah, I think I've always been interested in business and stuff outside of sport, and got more interested, more involved in stuff. And I guess slowly, without really having a defined way of doing it, kind of tried to upskill myself in some of those areas.
It sounds very similar to what I felt when I was sort of 16, 17. I was like, and I wish I've got two young boys, and I'll be telling them the exact opposite if they want to go into sport, basically. But I was 16, 17, and I just said I wanted to be a rugby player. I said, like, and I'm not saying I would ever have been an A-star student and absolutely academic, but I was probably more intelligent than my grades in my school sort of suggested, and I suppose I got lucky in a way. You know what I mean? That it worked out for me. But, there's so many thousands of other people who probably wouldn't have got lucky. And I think that's really important, is to have something different or to have something extra, that you're not just fully focused on one discipline. I think that's really important.
Yeah, I think so. And then also it's probably quite unique, isn't it? I don't know. I know there's like some research done on it. When I wrote my book, I spoke to a guy called Professor Lavely, who's done this research on kind of post-career planning and the effect it has on performance at the time. I think he did it on Aussie Rugby League players, actually, the cohort. And he found that, people who engaged in post-career planning is correlated with performing better at the time. And there could be all kinds of reasons for that. But it does kind of make sense that, if you're comfortable that you do have a backup, that you do have a career that you can go to, that's kind of mentally ticked off, that then you're a bit free to go and, perform better without that as an extra kind of layer of anxiety in there. So yeah, I think it makes sense, and there's a bit of science to back it up as well.
Unless you're a Premier League footballer, then all these things are somewhat moot.
That's true. Yeah. You have to work as well. Yeah,
exactly. Before you go into developing your own fashion line and music label and aftershave brand and all that. Of course, Dan, by the way, you've got another 55 years of life, all being well. You could fit in at least 3 degrees. I mean, it's academia. You're not lost to it yet. I mean, the world is your oyster in that regard. You could,
quite possibly. I mean,
no pressure.
I'm going to focus on my two boys. May not give me the amount of time to study too much at the minute with a 2 and a 7-year-old Daniel, but we'll see how we go.
Homework. Yeah. Anyway, you got to make sure you keep up with that for starters. Getting the maths in line. Anyway, enough of your academics. But Alistair, I wanted to go back into your career because I think one of your character traits as a triathlete was your competitiveness, your determination to succeed. And I think to race at your level, at a sort of elite triathlete level, you have to go to the edge of your physical and mental limit, often just one notch below that total collapse. Clearly, that's a rarity. It's not what you're striving for. But you've lived that world many times. What's actually going through your head in moments like that? How do you stay composed inside the chaos of those moments of real kind of pain?
One of the interesting things about triathlon, especially Olympic distance triathlon, is there's that, like you say, very internal levels of chaos because your entire body is, can be operating near to its maximum, and you're still trying to make conscious, good decisions. And there's external chaos of, you can't control the other 60 competitors, what they're going to do and how you're going to react and manage things. And so, I worked really hard on both, so from the physical point of view, like the focus, how can I stay completely focused to get absolutely the best out of myself in that moment. And I started that really young. I remember doing this thing where I was on this local hard bike ride, and it finished always up this long drag of a road that's like 3 kilometers long, this hill. And I remember practicing from a young age, just looking at a point on the bike in front of me and just thinking, in this moment, nothing matters apart from the fact that I don't get any further away from that point. Take everything out, complete focus. And I know there's like the two different like forms of being able to push yourself. You could be distracted, and I think sometimes it does work to, distracting yourself from the pain, but that only works if it's a relatively low level pain, I think, for me, and it could be very individual. So you're doing an Ironman, your legs really hurt, you've got 2 hours of the run to go, try and distract yourself. But if it is very, very intense and you really need to focus to keep all your systems working to go as fast as possible in that point, I think you need to be incredibly focused. I worked hard on that kind of focus. And I think probably from a young age as well, you're practicing a lot. You're going to the swimming sessions and running sessions and doing really hard stuff and working out how to stay in that moment and push yourself as hard as you can.
Yeah. I mean, were there moments when you felt you went too far in pursuit of performance, or were you able to kind of keep that sort of equilibrium?
Oh, no, you definitely go too far. And you 100%, as cliche as it sounds, you only really know where that equilibrium is if you go too far. And sometimes too far can be, you've got a 5-minute rep to do and you've gone too hard. And after 2 or 3 minutes, you're completely gone. And, you've gone over that line. In a race, it can be, the catastrophic effect of collapsing before the finish line because you've gone too far. In training, it can be you do that extra rep or whatever it might be, and that means you pull a calf and you're injured. And I think as an athlete, really, to get to be at 100% or at 99.9%, you really, you've kind of got an option. If you want to be the best that you possibly can be on those start lines, which is very much my kind of philosophy. I want to know that I'm stood on that start line at the Olympic Games, knowing that I've done everything I possibly can to be here in the best situation I can be. If you have that philosophy, you are going to step over the metaphorical 100% line every so often and get it wrong. I mean, the other option is you just be at 95% and you're happy with that. And I wasn't. So you definitely get it wrong a bit.
Alistair, what did give you speak so eloquently about, how hard you have to work, but what did give you your competitive edge?
In truth, I've got no idea. I think a happy circumstance of some traits, my environment around me, and quite a lot of luck, to be honest. I obviously had relatively good genetics to be able to for endurance and do a lot of training. I lived in a place that was really conducive to doing a lot of training, a great kind of social circle of people to do it with, great roads in Yorkshire to train on. a real kind of culture of a lot of that cycling and running and swimming and groups to do it with. And then, the luck of coming across the right people at the right time, a teacher at school that had a big impact, a coach that I met on the track when I was 14, 15 years old. So it's amazing, all those like things that have to come together, I think, to get you to where you go.
You're speaking about sort of a little bit of luck along the way. You speak about that sort of Kohler effect, don't you, in the book, and previously about it, basically product of who you surround yourself around. Is it chance, or is it, who do you select those people, sort of thing? Maybe you could expand on that a little bit.
Yeah, well, everything is kind of a combination of luck and choice, isn't it? And everyone's choices, doesn't matter how good a decision maker you are, have an element of luck in them. But I do also, I really believe you are a product of, firstly, the decisions you make, and your habits, and the people, and an extension of that is the people you surround yourself with. I mean, I don't think so. To take one example that was pure luck, my parents sent me to a school purely for academic reasons, but the school happened to have probably the best school running club in the country, and a teacher who had taken pupils out running every lunchtime in the lunch hour for 30 years, and basically had a program to get pupils running. I mean, that was complete luck. I mean, I just landed up with a runner, and I ended up in an environment where it was really positive. It was encouraged and kind of facilitated that I could go running for an hour every day of my school life, on quite often quite great trails and stuff. So really, really good luck. I mean, later down the line, happening to come across my long-term coach, Malcolm. I think the kind of process was I need to have some help to help me run a bit faster, go down to the local track and meet Malcolm. So there is an element of decision there, and surrounding yourself with the right kind of people and staying in that environment for sure. There's a balance of both.
I wondered to what extent all that training, all those kind of running clubs, and I know you often sort of you cycle to school as well, which is a rather efficient way of doing a bit of extra training. To what extent was that all part of what kind of helped sort of separated you from being one of the good to really one of the greats? Was that really sort of foundational? I suppose the question is also what it is that separates baseline talent, which frankly everyone who you're on the starting line with has a decent amount of. And so what are the factors that separate the good from the great in your disciplines?
There's lots of factors, and I think it's a multifactorial, a combination of all of them. I've always seen it that, we probably have a genetic natural cap to some extent on whatever we do, a ceiling, if you like. I mean, I could have had all the luck in the world and gone to just the right school for playing rugby or winning the 100-meter sprint at the Olympic Games, and I don't think either of those would have happened for me to be the best in the world at it. With all the luck and all the training and all the everything, all the right decisions, I still wouldn't have done it. Whereas, my ceiling for triathlon was obviously relatively high, probably not the highest compared to others, but relatively high. And I feel like, on the whole, the decisions I took and the work that I put in got me really close to my ceiling, probably closer than many of the other people I was competing against. To that ceiling, that the factors that went into that, I think, were a lot of work, but a lot of that work was facilitated by great people around me, enjoying the work, a great environment and community to do that with. Some good decisions, good coaching, having a brother to help push me and train with me, and many of those other factors.
Yeah, it's pretty convenient actually when you've got a gold medal winning Olympic athlete who just happens to be your sibling. That's kind of pretty convenient as someone just to kind of keep you, just have a pacer alongside you on those morning runs. But the subject actually that Dan and I have talked about a fair bit is, how do you remain consistent? How do you, get up morning after morning when the pain, boredom, fatigue is so relentless, and you just got to keep breaking it down and getting up and resisting the temptation, probably just to sort of lie in bed and say, I'll just procrastinate and leave it to tomorrow. I suppose Dan was talking about, I don't want to put words in his mouth, we were just talking before that often there's always a great carrot which is being dangled there, whether that's going to a World Cup, it's going to Olympics, and it's probably about reminding yourself consistently that there's always something bigger there in front of you. But how did you break that down when you're building towards essentially you're on 4-year cycles, at least for the biggest prizes?
Yeah, for me, I mean, that's an interesting response. I mean, my answer to this question is always you don't give yourself the option not to. And because for me, and it sounds like it was a bit different for you, Dan, but if I was laying in bed, on a Monday morning thinking, I feel really tired after a big weekend. Should I or should I not go swimming this morning? I should go swimming this morning because I've got a big event coming up in 4 months or 12 months or a year. That wouldn't be actually enough to get me out of bed every single Monday morning or to go training 3 times in a day. It's who I am. It's what I do. It's part of my life. I also try to remove all the barriers to me going training. So training facilities close to where you live, have all your kit ready to go by the door, always have working bikes and bike kit ready to go. So there's none of those barriers to thinking I can't go and do what I need to do today. It's all ready to go. And try to make those environments inspirational, and so I'd want to go and see friends. It's positive. I look forward to going to those environments, and then of course there are the days where you really don't fancy it, and you're sat on the sofa, and it's raining outside, and you're tired, and then you have to use willpower, but reduce the amount of willpower you have to use was my strategy. And when I needed to do that, I could motivate myself because, I don't know, my brother was going out, or because I wanted to, because I did have a big race in a few months I was training for.
Alistair, I find that really interesting because obviously my sport is very much a team sport. So like the way I sort of looked at it was, if I'm feeling like that on a Monday morning, and it's raining outside and your bed's nice and warm and you don't want to get up, etc., or you want to go to out with your friends on Friday night, whatever it is, I always sort of thought, well, I'm letting 30 other blokes down if I don't do that type of thing. I always thought to myself, like, if I was training for myself, I'm not quite sure I would have been as disciplined as someone like yourself, because I think I made, not that that's my personality, but I felt like when it's other people you're letting down, you drag your ass out of bed in that sense, you know what I mean? So I can only say how impressed I am for people who in individual traits in particular, who've just who've got no option. But I think you make a really good point as well, is removing all excuses. Because whoever you are, whether you're the best in the world or the worst of the world at things, everybody always will look for a slight excuse. So if your bike's not working, or if the bus isn't working to get to there, whatever, you know what I mean? If you take all those away, you give yourself half a chance.
And I think it's quite interesting. So I think I would have struggled from a team environment, because my mindset would have been
you've got people to bail you out.
Yeah, and the efficacy of me going training today is reduced. So therefore, it's not as incentivized for me. And I guess that's like my kind of very individual kind of control mindset. But yeah, it's interesting. I mean, maybe like our different sports kind of facilitated and built those mindsets in us, or maybe that's why we chose team and individual sports in the first place. I mean, who knows?
Well, a lot of this is somewhere between nature and nurture, I guess, in this broad debate. I wonder now that you've retired, although of course you're still very active, but I mean, do you miss that kind of intensity, or are you relieved to be out of it?
Yeah, there's lots of things I miss. The number one thing, 2 things I really miss. One is actually the simplicity of an athlete's lifestyle, especially when you're away on camps. I don't know if you found this, but really, I mean, an athlete's lifestyle is so simple and so easy from that point of view. You have one really fixed goal every day. That's just to get better. That's all you have to do. And to do that, you have to turn up, do your training as well as you can, eat well, sleep well, rest plenty, and you finish every day thinking, I've done everything I need to do today to fulfill my single goal in life. And you've got the excuse to be really selfish on every other front. And the rest of life doesn't exist like that. We have a plethora of goals going on the time, a load of competing interests. You know, we're always balancing different commitments, and so I miss that simplicity, and I think I always will. And yeah, I miss feeling really fit and knowing that my body's in amazing shape.
By the way, before Dan comes in, Kev, the producer, just suggested that your only other option might be to become a monk now. But
yeah.
Replace that sort of rather solitary, selfish routine. Dan, go ahead.
I was just going to add, like, for me, for the last like 18, 19 years, I've been told what time to be somewhere, what clothes to wear, how long things are going to last, what every Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday looks like for the last 19 years. So I suppose, in a sense, you're absolutely right. You're just following off one schedule. It's not real life, is it? In a sense, you know what I mean? It's almost like it's. I always think, like, I'm saying, I'm going to be coming into the real world when you leave professional sport, because you're on a page which is just not the same. You just get told what to do, when to do it, for how long, what to wear. And I suppose that's the challenge, I suppose. But like you said, it's so simple. You just know where you are, etc., etc. I wanted to touch on something like you, because Daniel's mentioned the difference between everyone's got some sort of ability when you're on that start line before you start off, when you step onto a rugby field, football field, whatever it is. How do you quote, or what does belief mean to you? Do you know, when you're at that line, do you believe that you've got the edge over these people, or does it mean something different to you?
Yeah, so for me, I didn't actually think belief was that important. For me, imagination was important, that I could see a way to win that race or achieve a result. It didn't matter at all whether I believed or not I could do it. I won loads of races thinking I've got no chance here, but if I do have a 1% chance, this is how it's going to happen. And so that kind of imagination and kind of then planning it out was much more important. But really, belief to me was that I always kind of felt the essence of performance and belief and confidence came from, for me, preparation and training. And as long as I could stand there and say, you know, I've done everything I can here to get myself to this point in the best possible situation I can, then really that was the ultimate confidence for me. And then you've got the pressure and expectation of going out and delivering. I never worried about that delivery part. For me, it was always about getting there and then actually the performance, as long as I'd prepared physically and kind of, I didn't really believe in mental performance, but I'd have like a very mental preparation, but I'd have a very like fixed, is all my equipment right? Do I know the course? Do I know the schedule beforehand? All those things. And as long as all that kind of technical preparation was in place, that's as good as I could get, really.
You mentioned imagination. How did you ever imagine, I suppose, with your brother being in the Olympics, sort of, did you ever imagine that scenario in terms of, and I suppose second part of that, how amazing was it having him to be a training partner, the competition, the competitive edge, etc. So I suppose, did you ever imagine that sort of scenario, and how much of a help was it having him as a training partner, in effect?
I definitely didn't imagine that scenario growing up. And, you know, I went as an 18-year-old. No, I mean, as a 20-year-old, I qualified for that first Olympics in Beijing, starting to believe that I could actually be a professional athlete. A few years later, Johnny and I were competing in a couple of the best in the world. And then probably the year before in London, you know, we were believing very much that both of us could be on the podium and it would actually be a race between us to win the gold medal. So at that point, you know, we went from zero belief to believing that it could happen. And then, to come first and third in London and then to pull it actually off in Rio to come first and second was amazing. I think, in terms of how much of a help it was a massive help. I think there's the training part of having each other's best training partner to push each other on. there was probably no one else in the world at the time that could push each of us across the three sports, or one or two people that we were super competitive with who we were never going to train with. So to have like one of your main competitors as a training partner was really important. And I think as something you can probably relate to as well, as like a young person going through the kind of challenges, the mental challenges of sport, and the travel and competing around the world and being on training camps and being away from home and learning to deal with all those kind of other things. To do that with your brother, I think was amazing. And we, ultimately stood on loads of start lines next to each other and stood on the start lines of the Olympic Games next to each other and I guess supported each other through that process. We'll never quite know how big an impact, but for sure it was enormous.
But before I ask maybe if Johnny had any sort of traits that you could read during a race or swim, whatever, I read somewhere that your parents said that you used to have competitions with who's to stack the dishwasher quickly enough. Who won that? Was there who used to win that one? Because I'm trying to get if I can get my two boys to get that on the cards, that would be amazing.
Yeah, you have to get my mum on next for some tips, but
that's the plan.
I think we were just super competitive at everything, to be honest. I actually don't remember the dishwasher thing, but it wouldn't surprise me. I remember just being in the garden at like our family home, and it'd be like table tennis 1 minute, and then football, then cricket, and then put a badminton net up, and we compete at that. And we were so competitive. I remember being on holiday and playing crazy golf and just having full-on fallouts about it, all that kind of thing. I think one of the most important things we did as kind of young athletes was working out how and when to kind of have some ground rules about when we were competing, when we weren't. And actually most of our endurance training, 80-90% of it, competition was off the cards. It was just about actually getting through it and enjoying the training and getting out and doing it. And then, when we went 10%, when we were going hard and pushing it, the kind of gloves were off and we'd compete.
How did that translate or transfer into, an Olympics in 2012, 2016 from playing badminton in the back garden, stacking the dishwasher? You know what I mean? Like how did that then translate or transfer into those, on the bigger stage of all?
Well, it doesn't happen overnight, does it? Like all sporting success, overnight successes happen over many years and lots of hard work. It was a slow progression from competing against each other in the garden to coming across each other in local city races and leagues, and then being a bit apart age groups, but competing alongside each other in Yorkshire champs, and then nationally, and then internationally, and then 10 years later you're competing at the Olympic Games. So I think by the time the actual Olympic Games came round, it's very natural to us. We'd competed against each other at every stage. We'd been competing against each other at the top flight racing in the World Series for a few years, and we'd probably worked out how to do it. And the biggest competitions brought us together. We, when it felt that made us feel like it was us against the rest of the world.
I was just thinking, by the way, going back to a domestic task, that Dan, there could be a domestic triathlon in creation here, which is you get the boys running around, stacking the dishwasher, to running upstairs to tidying their room. I don't know what the equivalent of the run would be, and then you can deliver the gold medal to the person who's tidied the house quickest. But that aside, just building on talking about your relationship, was it ever hard to want the best for him while needing to beat him?
Well, I always describe that as if I crossed the finish line first and Johnny wasn't second, I'd be slightly upset, but not that upset. And I wanted the best, always wanted the best for him, as long as it didn't involve his best was better than my best.
Yeah, fair. I mean, was there a sort of an unfair advantage because, almost like you were racing in peloton in some sort of figurative sense, that you were able to share tactics, or there was a sort of a sixth sense you were able to communicate a bit during races and help each other along?
Yeah, we could definitely help each other out. Kind of racing tactically together definitely had a positive impact on us.
Yeah. I want to just Let's move on from that. I want to find some time just to talk about your book, because you wrote a book, very interesting book called Relentless Secrets of the Sporting Elite, which is perhaps a more modest biography. Dan, of course, went straight in for the story about me. You, on the other hand, took a different attack and thought, well, actually, I'm going to write about all these other elite performers and see what I can learn from that. Maybe it could be your next book, Dan. But one of the ideas that you discuss a lot in the book is that there's no, I think we've been sort of establishing this now, there's no single route to the top, there's no one way to succeed, but there are clearly patterns. I think that's probably one of the things you're talking about in the book. There are these sort of psychological fingerprints of excellence, if you like. I mean, what have you observed through writing the book? What have you learned?
Yeah, so the premise of the book was me being able to speak to people from lots of other sporting disciplines to try and see what made them tick and their attitudes towards performance in very different environments. I kind of categorized the insights that came out of speaking to about 20 of these people into 3 buckets. One of the buckets is things that I can really relate to and understood, and they're the obvious things. When you speak to like Paula Ratcliffe and Chris Froome, endurance athletes, as you can imagine, have got a similar approach to a lot of things to me. Not the same, but similar. Then there was the stuff that I would never, that I probably kind of understood, but never really articulated. And a good example of that might be Michael Owen had this great analogy for self-belief and confidence, and kind of basically saying, I think I've got the terms right, but it's basically saying confidence is very transient and comes and goes, but the important thing in sport and performance is you've got really deep-held self-belief, and as long as that self-belief is there, the confidence can come and go. The problem is when you don't have that deep self-belief, you're always fighting a bit of a losing battle. And there was some stuff that was kind of completely new to me and completely out there from very different disciplines to mine. Example of that was when I spoke to AP McCoy, jump jockey, and that's a very different discipline. But I was fascinated about how, real long-term performers maintain that level of performance, resilience, focus over a period of time. And he was champion jockey for 20 years, and the number of races won stats are just phenomenal. I think 4,000 or 5,000 wins, and you're quite often competing 3 times a day, most days of the week, over 20 years. And when I asked him about how he maintained that level of performance and focus over that time, he had a few great comments about, well, you got to remember, I might have won 4,500, but I lost a lot more. And he said, there's a lot of numbers in there. Never mind, did I lose a lot? I also ended up in the ambulance a lot of times as well. You've got to remember that. And he said, you can never be too up and you can never be too down. You can be winning the biggest race one day and losing the second biggest the next day, and you can't get too excited by one and too down about the other. You just got to go through life and move on to the next thing, which I thought was fascinating. Kind of my approach was always just to actually try and slow down after a big performance and give yourself a bit of a metaphorical pat on the back, and before moving on to the next goal. But I guess when you're competing that much, you've got to have that approach.
Yeah, it's different frequency of performance. AP McCoy's philosophy reminded me, maybe you, Dan, as well, of people like Andrew Strauss and Alistair Cook, who we talked to, because when you're a batsman, there's more failure in your life than there is success, statistically over a long period. And I think you have to be able to have that equilibrium, that long-term mindset, that you might go out today and it won't be your day. You can't go in your sense. I suppose in some ways it feels like there's no reason why you shouldn't win every race, or there's no reason why Dan shouldn't win every game. But as a batsman, it's sort of more binary. If you get one bit of bad luck or one good ball, your day's over, and you just have to accept that. It's hard. There are more things that you can't control, I suppose, in certain disciplines. Equally, you could get knocked over or something extraneous could come and affect you. But batting sort of seems a good analogy. And also, when you do a big race, they're a bit more set piece. You're not going out doing big triathlons 3 or 4 times a week, I imagine.
No.
But
No.
let me ask you something, because in the book, I think you also interviewed people like Ronnie O'Sullivan, and I wondered whether, just looking at the whole range of people you talk to, do you think that greatness always comes with some kind of darkness or cost?
No, I don't actually. I think quite often that is maybe an over-exaggerated kind of, true to an extent, truism, but it's exaggerated a lot by people to kind of tell stories in that domain. And actually, sometimes I'm not just having a go at journalists, or I'm saying the athletes themselves. Quite, being a sport, being an athlete, a lot of the time it's pretty flipping boring. You get up, you go training, you go to bed, you compete most weekends, and that's your life. There's not a lot of stories to be told. So I think there's an element of that. But we should also remember, I mean, sport fundamentally is an incredibly selfish endeavor. I mean, you're trying to, you're training really hard and preparing hard to try and win, to make yourself feel good at the expense of making other people who are trying hard feel bad. I mean, it is incredibly selfish. There is no way around that. And we kind of have to admit that, but that doesn't mean that, and of course that's the kind of athlete and the person people see a lot as well. It doesn't mean you have to be like that the whole time. So I think, quite often there is that element of sport, and then there's many other elements of sports people as people outside the sport that probably makes them a lot more human.
Alistair, you mentioned, you said that you had to make the most of your career and how short it is, et cetera, from a sports person's point of view. Do you feel like you did that, making the most of it?
Yeah, that's I think that's the question that as an athlete you'll always be struggling with, and maybe as life in general. The person who can find contentment is the lucky man, aren't they? I think, there will always be things I think I could have done better. That I could have won more races, those decisions where I chose to do something a bit too much and got injured, or do something silly tactically. Of course, there is all of those. Like a self-critical thinker of a person who's tried to maximize the performance. I don't think you would have done your job if you didn't think like that. But I think looking back on reflection, when people say, what would you have done differently? I kind of think, well, if I'd done anything differently, I ultimately might not have won those 2 Olympic gold medals. And that's the thing that I'm most proud of. And the 16 or 18-year-old me going into sport, to say you'd have an 18-year-old career as a professional triathlete when I didn't even know that's possible at the time, and go to 3 Olympic Games and win 2 gold medals, I would have never thought that was possible. So I'm on reflection, I'm pretty happy. Although there'll always be things that I could have done better. Yeah.
I'm just sort of wondering, when you sort of, interesting that you mentioned the 2 Olympic goals, when you sort of go to bed at night and you're sort of, you're in that zone of sort of thought and bits and pieces, what memories come to mind of your career? Are they the podiums, getting the Olympic goals, the countless events that you've won, the countless races you've won, or are there sort of training days that sort of stick out to you, or is it all about the good moments, or maybe it's games or results that didn't quite go your way?
I think all of the above, actually. I look back on some of the big races and events, but I also look back on particular training days that stand out, or training camps, being with a great group of lads training hard and just really enjoying that, and the simplicity of it, like I said.
Any in particular stand out, Alistair, those training camps or training days, and what it consists of?
Yeah, just so long training days at home. A few of those were being out maybe, and something's happened and things went wrong, and it's raining. We ended up riding back in the dark, but having a laugh about it. Being away on training camps, we did a few training camps to Tenerife over the years, to stay on top of the mountain there, on top of the volcano, and basically lived in little huts up there, and just trained super hard in a place that was, well, overnight there was no phone signal. It went dark and quiet and no proper electricity. And just like, I guess that's something that stands out, as well as it's easy now, isn't it, to look back on things with rose tinted glasses as well, though. But yeah, I do think there's something about that simplicity and training hard with good people is important.
What does success mean to you? I mean, following up, you can answer that in the most sort of broadest life sense, and then thinking about what's coming next.
Yeah, the broad life sense is success means what's the word? Kind of like happiness is the easy one, but just a sense of contentment that you're happy with what you've got going on in your life. You've got the right amount, the balance of things that you want to achieve, the right amount of structure. I mean, I know that's like I'm talking about perfect. No one I think part of it is the striving, isn't it? Well, it is definitely for me to find that. For kind of future life, I mean, that is the essence of it, really. And as I try and work out exactly what I want to do more of, it's finding that right balance of stuff that keeps me engaged mentally and motivated and gives me something to get up for. But also I'm very conscious that, still exercise, sport plays a big part of my life. So having time in all my days to be active and do that is important as well.
I wonder, has it been difficult for you in any way? What have been the challenges in sort of redefining Alistair Brownlee version 2, if you like, without the training plan, without that structure, without that start line in front of you? What have been the challenges around that? Not, I mean, you're clearly very busy, but there must have been some challenges in that transition phase as you enter a new phase of life.
Well, I think I'm still very much in that transition phase, so maybe you should ask this question again in 6 months. Because at the moment, I feel like I've been on a prolonged holiday and been enjoying myself. But yeah, I mean, I've had an incredibly, like Dan said, incredibly structured life. I mean, where every morning I've got up and I've gone training, and my days are structured, very structured around doing training at this time, that time, and that time. And the removal of that structure is a challenge at times, but I actually haven't felt it too badly yet. As I said, I think as I work out more and kind of fall into a more normal kind of life pattern, we'll see.
Alistair, I just wanted to touch on, maybe before we get into sort of some quick fire ones towards the end, the difference in you on the start line in 2012 compared to you on the start line in 2016. How much does pressure play a part, and the expectation going from 2012, maybe not having that pressure on you and the expectation compared to being the main man and the person compared to 4 years previously? Because I found for me, and feel free to disagree or whatever, but I found at the start of my career, when there was no pressure on me, things were quite easy. No one was, there was no sort of reputation to lose. No one's expected much of you, and you were able to just go out there and play freely. And then all of a sudden, when you gain some reputation, you gain a bit of momentum, and people are expecting you to hit seriously high standards. For me, that's when I found it was quite difficult to really keep to those standards. So I just went interested to know the mindset shift between 2012 and 16.
Yeah, that pressure thing is definitely a big factor. And that wasn't a big shift because already in 2012, I'd kind of, a lot of people had said, I was the favourite to win the race. And so I really felt that as a big external pressure. And my coach had sat me down a few years before that and, said, "Oh, you've been really lucky up till now. You've been the underdog and no one's expected anything of you. And now everyone expects you to win and perform." And it gave me the whole kind of pressure is a privilege, and said, the thing you've always got to remember about pressure is you've got to have done something to deserve the pressure, and just see it as a positive like that, which I always definitely did. The big difference, I think, between the two races in London and Rio was that in Rio, there was the repeating thing and a load of pressure on myself, but I'd had kind of injuries in the lead up to it. I'd had to have bits of time off running that had been incredibly stressful, and so I felt like it was actually much more kind of a battle with myself to be there in the best shape I could be in, and really it was a very internal kind of, can I cope with this, with the fact that I've been injured and things, the preparation hasn't been as absolutely perfect as it could have been, and still perform.
Do you truly believe pressure is a privilege? Because there's so many people to me who say, "Oh, I would hate to be in your position, having to kick a goal in front of 80,000 people or run in front of millions of people, etc." Like, I'm really interested to know, because I'm not quite sure I know the answer to this, by the way. But do you honestly believe that pressure is a privilege?
Yeah, I don't know if I know the answer either. I think, in the case of you kicking the ball or me being on the start line, I just don't think you need to think about it too much, do you?
Yeah.
You just need to get on with it. But yeah, I mean, it's easy, isn't it, to sit here and reflect and say, of course it's a privilege. You know, how many people get that opportunity to kick the try in front of 80,000 people, screaming fans, yeah, of course there's the psychological kind of difficulties of that moment, but what an amazing thing. So yeah, I think on balance, it's a very, very fortunate position.
Shall we wrap up with a few quick fire questions?
Let's do it.
Yeah,
It depends what they are.
The answer, yeah. Well done. That's the first one. You answered that correct. Right. We'll ask you a couple each. What's the kindest thing anyone's ever done for you?
Am I going first? Are you going first?
No, you're answering.
Okay. What's the kindest thing someone's ever done for me? I'm trying to think of one specific example. Picked me up and taken me home off the side of the road when I've crashed my bike, and just a random stranger, and driven me out of the way to go home. It's actually happened a couple of times. But yeah, I think that act of random stranger kindness is amazing.
Built-in risk of your profession, I guess, being picked up off the road by strangers having fallen off a bike.
Alistair, if you could go to one sporting event in the world, whether it's the Masters, golf, whether it's the Football World Cup final, Rugby World Cup, whatever, what one would you choose?
I'm cheating by saying the Olympic Games, because you can just watch so much at the Olympic Games. But yeah, Olympic sport.
Any specific event at the 100-meter final, or one that you could?
Well, outside the triathlon, yeah, one of the big track and field nights that had the 100-meter final and other stuff on.
Okay, one more from me. If we weren't talking about sport right now, what's a topic you'd be passionate to discuss?
We could talk about, it is kind of about sport, but about really good decision making. I've always been very interested in that, and the philosophy and the kind of science behind it. I don't know, current affairs and politics. I'm trying to think what other podcasting subjects there are.
Well, we're creating our part 2 and part 3s as we speak. We take notes. We'll come back to you, and Brownlee on politics. I think it's got a nice ring about it. Could be a weekend magazine show.
I'm not sure we'd have any listeners. I don't know if anyone wants to hear me drone on about politics, but we could try.
Yeah.
And just to finish, Alistair, if you were writing a letter to your younger self, what would the main bit of advice be in it?
I think really easy. You'd be confident in your path, and go for it.
Well, on that note, Alistair Brownlee, thank you very, very much.
Thank you. That was great.
Thanks, Alistair.
Well, I thought that was really interesting with Alistair. It took us into another discipline which we haven't gone anywhere near, which is triathlon of running. Well, we've done cycling with Geraint Thomas, but triathlon is something completely different, very different from the kind of team sport you're used to. What were your main reflections from that? Yeah,
just how different it is to a team sport. I know, like you said, I know we've spoken to individual athletes, but I just felt, for me, it was just like, it was quite interesting, him sort of saying to me that he'd find it harder to get up on a Monday morning, on a cold, wet Monday morning in a team environment, and me saying the opposite. So, I mean, yeah, look, the amount of training, the amount of pain that those guys have to go through on a daily basis is just incredible. But like, it's funny, kind of listening to him, it kind of felt like he enjoyed it, didn't it? In terms of that was a decision he's made from a fairly early age, and he was on board with that. So, no, really interesting, and really good to discuss some bits with him.
Yeah, that was one of the bits that stuck out for me, definitely, when you talked about, you had 30 other guys who are motivating you to get your ass out of bed and get out there. He said it was completely the opposite. There was something about a lack of control, or maybe he felt that it was like there were all these free riders who were going to somehow make his training and performance less efficient. But the fact there were other guys in the way, which I suppose is a differentiator between what it means to be a single-minded individualist versus a team player.
I did love, though, is like, in an individual, clearly it's an individual sport, but it almost felt like, to me, every single day he was competing against his brother. You know what I mean? It kind of felt like it was yes, it was an individual sport, and yes, he had to individually train. But when you're training against a friend or someone you know well, or, best case scenario for someone like Alistair, having your brother there, then it probably does make it a little bit easier to, like I said, whether it's having bragging rights from a game of badminton in the back garden, or Olympic Games training, etc. So I think that would have made a big difference to their training regime day to day. You know what I mean? To be able to bring those levels more often, more frequently than perhaps others.
Definitely. I think you're right also about the pain. I think it is true to say that at some level, in a perverse kind of way, you've got to like pushing yourself to beyond the limit of what most people can endure. It's kind of, I don't think whether I could say I've kind of been there. I've certainly had a stitch running around the park, but I don't think that quite qualifies. But you have probably been there in those shorter spurts where you're just being flogged on the training pitch. And I don't know whether you could say you enjoy it. Maybe it's a post-rationalization. You're once you've showered off and you lie back, you sit back, go, yeah, that was good. That felt good. You pushed your body to the limit. Yeah. And there's a satisfaction in that somewhat after the event rather than during it.
You enjoy it. You enjoy it afterwards, for sure. Yeah, there's, very few people will enjoy it in the moment, but yeah, there's no doubt when you sit back and when you sort of look back at what you've done, you definitely sort of enjoy it, and it's worthwhile then. But I thought that was really good. We're making a good list of Olympic champions, Ashes winners, world champions, etc. So we're making a good list. There's a lot of pressure on us to continue with this.
I know. Well, on that note, listen, as always, great to see you, great to chat, and see you next time, mate.
Cheers, Dan.